Lepo pozdravljene, spoštovane gledalke, spoštovani gledalci in dobrodošli v podkastu Vroča tema na spletnem portalu Domovina.je. Danes gostimo prav posebno gostjo, ameriško novinarko Terry Anzur oziroma Terry Anzur, ki je slovensko-ameriška novinarka z več kot 30-letnimi izkušnjami v televizijskem novinarstvu. Svojo kariero je začela v tiskanih medijih in radijskem poročanju, nato pa se je uveljavila kot voditeljica in poročevalka na nacionalnih televizijah v Združenih državah Amerike, vključno s CBS in NBC. Delala je v največjih ameriških mestih, kot so Los Angeles, New York in Chicago, pa tudi v prestolnici Washington DC. Vodila dnevno informativne oddaje na postajah KTLA in CBS. Poleg novinarstva pa je bila tudi izredna profesorica novinarstva na Univerzi Južne Kalifornije, je tudi avtorica knjige o razvoju lokalnih televizijskih novic. Njeno delo danes vključuje tudi mednarodno medijsko izobraževanje in usposabljanje novinarjev po vsem svetu, od Pakistana pa vse do Maldivov. Poleg novinarstva je Terry tudi avtorica knjige Inventing TV News, Live and Local in Los Angeles, ki raziskuje zgodovino televizijskih novic v največjem kalifornijskem mestu. Prav tako piše potovalni blog Strangers in the Living Room, ki deli svoje izkušnje in nasvete s potovanj po svetu. Zanimivo je še to, da ima Terry Anzur slovenske korenine. Njeni starši so pred več kot 100 leti emigrirali v ZDA prav iz Slovenije. Odločila se je naučiti slovenskega jezika in pridobila je tudi dvojno državljanstvo ZDA in slovensko, torej Evropske unije. Poglejmo si kratek klip o Terry Anzur.
U.S. warplanes take aim on Bosnia in a NATO airstrike. Hello, I'm Terry Anzur. It was a warning to the Bosnian Serbs to stop the shelling of innocent civilians in Sarajevo. American fighter jets, along with Spanish, Dutch, and French warplanes, were gunning for an ammunition dump near Pale. U.S. officials were quick to speak out in support of the air raids, but Defense Secretary William Perry was just as quick to state that American troops won't be drawn into the fighting. Chris?
If you have a sweet tooth and you still want to be healthy, the makers of M&Ms have something just for you. Today, the owners at the Briny Breezes mobile home park voted to move ahead with a plan that could land them $1 million for each of their mobile homes. A 2-month-old South Florida baby is lucky to be alive. His grandmother was watching him in their trailer home. If you're thinking about giving a pet as a gift this holiday season, state inspectors want you to know what to look for so that you buy a healthy animal.
Ja, to je bila Terry Anzur oziroma Terry Anzur. Good day. Good evening, Terry. When I read through your biography, I'm honestly fascinated by the guest we're hosting here today on Domovina. A nearly 40-year career in American journalism. When I'm reading your biography, starting from print and spanning national television networks, you were also a journalism professor in California, teaching young reporters how to tell stories on the ground, even in countries just discovering democracy. But if we start this conversation with the question, when did you first discover your love for journalism?
Well, Luca, hvala za povabilo, and also thank you for allowing me to speak in English, because I'm learning Slovenian, but it's been a very difficult struggle because my family lost the language in America, and I'm working very hard to get it back.
You need to have a lot of courage to learn Slovenian.
But so many Slovenians speak English that I have very little opportunity to practice. So thank you very much for that. And as for journalism, when I was a kid, when I was 8 years old, I wrote a poem. And I sent it into the local newspaper, and they published it, and they sent me $5. And I thought, wow, I can write something and get paid for it. That's really cool. At the time, I was also quite serious about being a ballet dancer, but that didn't really work out for me. So I decided to go to university and study journalism. And I was going to cover ballet and cultural things, but then I became involved with stories, radical protests and police and crime and politics. And I got into hard news and I never got out.
In Europe, we often hear about how challenging it is for many American students, how so many have to go into debt and spend much of their career paying it off. How did you manage to study at Stanford?
Well, my family was very middle class, and like most parents, when kids are born, the first thing they do is start saving up money for college. Even then, my family didn't have enough money, but I was really fortunate that I got what they call the Ronald Reagan Scholarship, which allows students with a certain grade average to select any school in California, and Stanford accepted me. I don't think I would be able to go there today because it's more technically focused, and all the people inventing the great Silicon Valley companies are coming out of Stanford. But fortunately for me, I got to go to Stanford and work on the university student newspaper, and that's how I got started in my career.
You said you're a proud Slovenian American. What led you to reconnect with your Slovenian heritage? And how has that dual identity shaped your recent work?
Well, to go back to how I was raised, we always made potica and goveja juha, and my father was really obsessed with sports, and he played trumpet in a polka band. And so I was raised very culturally in a way that I think of as very Slovene. But my father thought that his parents came from Austria, because in 1911, it was Austria. It was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And my full name, Teresa Maria Teresa, I mean, he was really proud of being Austrian, as he would say. So later, while working as a journalist in New York, I was introduced to the Austrian ambassador, and he asked me, "Where is your family from?" And I said, "Oh, a small town near Ljubljana." And he said, "You're not even Austrian, you're Slovenian." So I began looking into it, and I just connected with the culture because it was what I was raised with.
You live between Florida and Ljubljana now. How does the rhythm of life differ between the two?
Biggest difference is how much time I spend in the car. I moved to Florida during COVID from Los Angeles, where I felt like I spent my whole day in the car, sitting on the freeway, in traffic, not going anywhere.
That's how I felt when I was traveling in California.
So you know, it's 6 lanes of traffic and it's not moving at all. I really liked that I could come here, and I live in the center of Ljubljana, and I can walk out my door and everything I need is there. Grocery stores, kavarnas, everything is there. My Slovenian neighbors think I'm crazy because Slovenians love their cars. But the biggest difference for me is I get to come here, and most of the time I don't worry about driving. If I need a car, I rent one.
But when did you decide to move to Slovenia, and why was that?
It had to do with my son. He was he actually was accepted to the University of Ljubljana to study economics, but then he received a scholarship from the Rotary to study in Poland. And since he already spoke Polish, because my mother's side of the family came from Poland, he went there. And he loved it so much, he said, "I'm going to live in Europe and I'm never coming back." So then we had the challenge to figure out how could he stay here as an American. And it was really easy for us to connect with my grandfather's birth in the small town of, nearby Resnice. And we had all the paperwork, and so we were able to get Andrew citizenship in Slovenia. And then I applied for it later. And we started coming here for family vacations. One time in Piran, we rented a really nice place with a beautiful view. And I just sat there with my coffee and I said, "I think I want to move here."
But it's a bit unusual, especially for someone who grew up in sunny California.
Well, we also like snow, we like skiing. I actually like the change of seasons here. I love coming here in December for the, I guess, Christmas market, I can call it that.
So you fly across the ocean many times per year?
2 or 3 times per year.
Mm-hmm. From a TV anchor, as we said, to a media coach, author, travel blogger, how do you decide when it's time to reinvent yourself?
That is a great question. And what I have to say in response to it is that I did it because I'm very much a product of my time. It isn't so much that I changed, but the media changed. I started out working for a newspaper, and then I had the opportunity to go into television when newspapers were kind of dying, and then be on television when the internet was coming into more influence. And so I've always adapted. I'm always trying to do real ethical quality journalism, but adapting in my job to work with the media where I can connect with the most people in the audience.
Your travel blog, Strangers in the Living Room, is such a great name. Where did it come from?
Well, as you mentioned in the introduction, I wrote a book which is now called Inventing TV News. But the original title of the book was Strangers in the Living Room. When television first covered a breaking news story way back in 1949 in Los Angeles, it was the first time that people saw live breaking news, not just hearing it on the radio, but seeing it on television. And I was lucky that I worked with some of the old timers who had been part of that. And they told me that there were only a handful of televisions in Los Angeles at the time. And when people heard that this news was on, they would go into the neighbor's house to watch it. And you had strangers in the living room. So fast forward to my career where I was teaching journalism in foreign countries. And I started writing this blog where I was making really snarky comments about the country I was visiting and the food and some silly things that happened. I didn't realize all my students were reading it in English. And they had a lot of questions about it. And so I needed a name for the blog, and I said, well, I'm always a stranger in somebody's living room, so I'll use that.
What's the most unexpected living room that you ever found yourself in?
When I was covering Poland for CBS, in 1982, when Poland was under martial law. And the people of Chicago, the Polish community, heard that there were no shoes for the children in the winter. So they collected a boatload of shoes to send to Poland. And we were there with the TV crew to document the boat arriving and the shoes being given to the children. While we were there, we also wanted to do a story on Solidarność. But it was very difficult because it was martial law, and we always had a government official with us telling us what we could do, what we couldn't do. So one day we're driving down the street in Gdansk, and there's Lech Wałęsa. And we follow his van, and we followed him to his house, and there I was in Lech Wałęsa's living room interviewing him about the Solidarity movement. And he couldn't say very much because the government official was there, and he was very careful with his words. But it was so cool to be there with this person who was making history and changing his whole country.
What year it was?
1982.
If we stay a little bit more at your YouTube blog, you recently made a video about Melania Trump's hometown, Sevnica. Your clip, this exact clip about Melania Trump has more than 400,000 views on YouTube. What's so special about it, in your opinion?
I really connected with Sevnica because my family is also from a small town on the Sava River. And I found it fascinating to go there and talk with people about the most famous Slovenian in the world, probably, except for maybe Luka Doncic. And it's the place she left behind. She hasn't been back. And I think there's some resentment about the lawsuit, so that people couldn't really profit from having a tourism based around this. But I did try the Melania cake and learn a little bit about the history, and people were very welcoming to me, and it was fun to make the video. And I was really happy that it got so much reaction.
I've seen in the comments that some people complain about the usage of the word communism. You described Slovenia as a former communist country. Not everyone was happy about it. Some tend to believe Slovenia didn't experience real communism.
Well, as you know, Luca, there are different kinds of communism. It wasn't Chinese communism. It wasn't Soviet communism. In fact, Tito, in a way, was a genius because he kept Slovenia from going through the kind of communism that came with Stalin and having the non-aligned movement and many things were different from other kinds of communism. But the reality is that, the business was planned by the government, the farms were collectivized, wineries and everything. So it was a form of communism. As an American, I have a hard time describing it as socialism because what we think of socialism is it's something more like Sweden. And Yugoslavia was definitely not that. So I stand by what I said, but I realize that many Slovenians feel differently about it.
Yeah, there is presence of Yugo-nostalgia.
Yeah, and I find Yugo-nostalgia fascinating. By the way, it never felt right for me to say that I was Yugoslavian. When I was growing up, I did look on the map to see where Resnice and Ljubljana were, and I'm like, come on, Dad, aren't we from Yugoslavia? And he said, no, we're Austrian. And grandfather served in the army of Emperor Franz Joseph, so he was very proud of being Austrian. And it never felt right to say we were Yugoslavian. But now we came here. Andrew found an apartment in a block that was built, I think, in the 60s. And so we lived in one of these wonderful concrete apartments with a balcony and beautiful view. And I loved it. And I like visiting the history with my son, who writes some books that are based in the history of the former Yugoslavia. And I'm fascinated by it. But on the other hand, I'm glad to be here now and not then.
You said that you like it, that Ljubljana looks a bit like Vienna.
Well, yeah, if you look, for example, in the Kavarna of the Grand Union Hotel, it has very much the vibe of the place where you might have a Sachertorte in Vienna. But then there's very Slovenian cafes and gostilnas. And so it's really an influence from Austria and Italy and Hungary and Croatia. And it all comes together in this great mix of cultures that I really enjoy.
Tell us more about your early career. Why would you switch your job so often and constantly move across the states?
I didn't have any choice. In television in America, we work on a contract basis. And so you are hired and sign a contract for 2 or 3 years usually. And at the end of that contract, you have the option to leave and go to a better job, or they have the option to let you go, even if your work is really good. Maybe they want somebody who will work for less money, or somebody who's younger, or whatever reason they might have. So every 2 or 3 years, I had a decision to make. And I came up in television during the times when there were not many women, and many stations were looking to hire more women. So every time my contract was up, I would get the opportunity to move to a different city. And so I was able to work all over the United States.
Yeah, you've anchored the news in some of American biggest cities. Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. What was the biggest on-air moment that taught you something you could still carry today?
Wow. So many, but I would have to say the Oklahoma City bombing. I had just started working for...
Was it in 1993?
1994. Well, we started the network in 1994, and it would be 94 or 95. Now, you caught me there. I should have looked this up. But what I remember is being on the set, and I was doing a segment on a completely different topic, and then the breaking news starts to come in, and you realize a bomb has gone off in Oklahoma, of all places, in a federal building, in a government building. And then it started to become clear that it was a daycare center full of small children. And you're out there with no safety net. You know, you're live broadcasting to a national audience, and you have to bring all of your journalistic training to be very careful and only say what you can verify and only what you can confirm from officials. And, later on you find out you won an award or something for it. But I just remember feeling very much on the hot seat that day. And also in that job, I did get to report on the verdict in the O.J. Simpson trial. So that was another moment that the verdict came down and we had to deal with it.
Not all your coworkers were happy to have you in studio as young and ambitious TV anchor. We were talking about this before we filmed this podcast. There is a story about an older gentleman who was afraid of you. Tell us about it.
I don't think Hal Fishman was afraid of anybody, but he was very protective of his turf. And I was hired to co-anchor. We call presenters anchors in America. To present the news with him. And the ratings...
Was it at
KTLA. And Hal Fishman, he's passed away, but at the time was, highly respected. He had been in that job forever. And all of a sudden, the ratings started to be much better when I joined the show. And some newspaper wrote, Terry Anzur is the reason for this, and Hal is very good too. And he was insulted by this. And I also think the company was looking to maybe go with someone younger and someone who was Latina. And so my contract came up, and I was let go. I always got along well with Hal. He bought me dinner every night, and he let my son, when he was a little boy, go flying in his plane. And I was truly shocked when this happened because we were winning awards for our journalism. The show was doing great with the audience. And suddenly it was gone. And that was a huge shock.
And I promised to ask you that. What was your biggest career mistake?
Okay. When I was a young reporter working for a wire service, it was United Press International, similar to the Associated Press. And, from sports, the America's Cup yacht race. In 1977, the winner of that race was Ted Turner, who is quite a character. He went on to be the owner of the Atlanta Braves and, eventually he started CNN. So I was the only woman covering this sporting event. All the other sports reporters were men. And Ted liked the ladies, and he only wanted to talk to me. So every day, little 25-year-old Terry got a scoop from Ted. And I got offers to become a sports reporter, which I wasn't interested in doing at the time. But then Ted took me aside and he said, I'm going to start this new network. It's going to be called CNN, and you're pretty, and you can report, and I want you to come work for me. And I said, oh, Ted, I want to be a serious journalist at the New York Times. I'm not interested. And I look back on that as my biggest career mistake because I could have been the first employee on air of CNN.
But you said to me that you almost worked for Fox TV.
Well, I did, in a way. This small network where I did a 2-hour daily show about the top stories of the day. And people could call in and comment. And I was working with a very famous commentator named Chris Matthews. It was run by a guy named Roger Ailes. And Roger had these ideas, like our 2-hour show and other crazy shows. And it was owned by NBC, but they had a difference of opinion with Roger Ailes, and they wanted to make a deal with Bill Gates to start MSNBC, Microsoft NBC. So they shut our network down, and then Roger went to work with Rupert Murdoch and started Fox. So this little network, America's Talking, that I'm very proud to be one of the founding members of, became two things. It became MSNBC, which is the very liberal channel in America, and Fox, which is the most conservative cable TV channel in America. And I feel like I had a little bit to do with the start of that. Like I was the original Fox News babe. They put a light on my legs they cut a hole through the desk and they put a light on my legs, so I would sit there and doing the news. And the Fox women presenters are known for their looks, as well as their journalistic ability. So I think I was the first person to get that treatment.
You've seen TV journalism evolve for over 3 decades. If young Terry Anzur started out today, would she still go into TV news or take another path?
I would not go into TV news if I was starting today.
Why not?
Because working with my students, I realized that they're going into a business that is dying. No one is watching television news in America except old people. And the younger people are gravitating more towards formats like this and getting their news from various places online. I really think a young person starting today is better to start a YouTube channel or a podcast. And that is an entirely different set of skills than I was teaching for straight-ahead television journalism. The other thing is that when you start a career in television news in the United States, the pay is so bad. It is the lowest paying job you can get with a college degree in America.
But do you think today's journalism students are too focused on tech and not enough of storytelling?
Well, I think the tech is helpful for storytelling. You can take a DeGero backpack and you can report live from any news anywhere in the world. I mean, that technology is phenomenal. What I see with the students is they're not afraid of the technology, they're afraid of talking to people. You say, go to the scene and talk to somebody. Well, can't I just text them? No, you have to go talk to them. Well, in the olden days, we used to just pick up the phone and call people. Well, maybe I can text them and make an appointment to call them. They're a little bit shy and a little bit short on the people skills to go out and gather the story. The technology part of it seems to come very easily to them.
Speaking about the old days, you acted in a Hollywood movie that I saw as a kid with my school. I think it was in 1999. The movie was called The Perfect Storm. Tell us about it.
Well, I was anchoring the news on KTLA at the time, and when you're on television in Los Angeles, many actors and directors are watching you, and you get to be in their movies. So I was chosen to be the television anchor in The Perfect Storm. And when the people are in the bar waiting for news of what happened to the guys on the fishing boat, I was on there going, the storm is really bad now, waves crashing and destroying entire towns. And the people are horrified and listening to me. But the backstory is that we recorded a full day of newscasting about this fictional storm. And it ended up not being in the movie because the special effects were so good that you saw George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg thrashing around in the waves, and they didn't need a newscaster to come on and go, the storm is really bad now. So we were only in the movie for like 30 seconds.
Was it worth it?
Yeah. You get union pay, and every year I get a little bit of money because people are still watching the movie.
Great. So tell about how has journalism changed over the past few decades? It often seems that mainstream media, not only in the United States but also in Europe, increasingly align ideologically with the Democratic Party. What's your take on that shift?
Well, it's a shift in the values of journalism. Back when I was starting out in the late 70s and the 80s, there was a strong professional ethic that whatever your personal beliefs are, you leave it outside. I'm pretty sure that most of my colleagues, even then, were all on the left. I avoid using the word liberal here in Europe because it has a different meaning than it does in the United States, so I'll say on the left. But you would be very unprofessional if you allowed that to show in your reporting. The upshot of that is that nobody wanted to cover the right. So I said, I'll do it. I don't mind. And I got to cover some fascinating people because I had that beat all to myself. And
Can you name some of them?
Rudolph Giuliani, covered the Reagan administration, of course. George Bush, the first George Bush, I went to Saudi Arabia and some other places with him on Air Force Two. So I had a fascinating beat covering that side. But I never allowed myself to become an outlet for their talking points. I always tried to ask tough questions. The difference today that you're asking me about is that journalists seem to choose a side, and then that dictates what their reporting is going to be about. You have people on the left who are journalists just giving the talking points of their side, and people on the right just giving the talking points of their side. So you have one channel where, for example, Trump is terrible, and on the other channel, Trump is great. And the journalists are okay with that when they really should be in the middle.
Your teaching period didn't stop at the anchor desk. You've taken your skills around the globe, from Sri Lanka to Maldives, Pakistan to Vietnam. If I find your Maldives episodes maybe the most interesting one, can you explain it to our listeners?
Okay. When I decided to give up active newscasting, I decided to start my company because I was asked by a huge consulting firm, would I join them? And it didn't really work out for me to join this company, but I started my own company. And the first job that I got was a contract from the government of the Maldives, which had been under a dictatorship for 40 years. And they were having their first multi-party democratic presidential election. And my job was to go there and teach the journalists how to cover an election. And I assembled a team. I had a trainer for producers, a trainer for management. I took some young people because the reporters I was training were 16-year-olds and training them to cover the politics of their country in both Divehi, their local language, and English. And for the first time, they had opposition candidates. There were 9 of them. One of the opposition candidates was elected. And we brought democracy to Maldives. And it was really exciting. The kids all went on, my kids all went on to be the stars of media in Maldives.
But what does ethical journalism looks like when facts can literally put lives at risk?
What was interesting about Maldives is it is a 100% Muslim country. There is absolutely no freedom of religion. You cannot be a Maldivian citizen unless you are a practicing Sunni Muslim. So one of the things was you could never say anything questioning the Muslim religion. And one day the students did a story on Valentine's Day, which we have in the United States, not so much here. I think you have St. Gregor's Day here. But
we imported it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you buy and in Maldives, they imported it as well. And they had teddy bears and flowers and chocolate in the stores. And so I sent a reporter down to cover this. And he finishes his story by saying, so this just proves we are now a secular country. I almost got sent to prison for that. They did not appreciate it. So the reason I bring this up is that when you talk about freedom of speech and bringing that to a developing country that has not had democracy before, you have to start with religion. When you look at the American First Amendment, Congress shall make no law restricting freedom of religion is first, then speech. And if you have this whole area that's forbidden because of how their government and their culture is structured, you're always censoring yourself. And that was very difficult in terms of covering opposition candidates because no one wanted to be the candidate that was saying something bad about the religion.
You're now living in Ljubljana, and I imagine you follow, at least a bit, Slovenian media, at least to some extent. What stands out for you? How does our media landscape differ from what you experienced in the United States and abroad?
Well, it's in some ways the same. I recently gave a talk at the Jesuit College here in Ljubljana talking about freedom of speech issues. And I presented a map of media bias in the United States. And you had some outlets that were very much on the left, some that were center-left, center-right, and then some that were very much right. There was a similar map that was prepared by a professor named Žiga Turk, and he placed all of the Slovenian media on this spectrum. So trying to be a good consumer of news, I always keep in mind, Domovina is going to have this point of view, or RTV is going to have this point of view. And I try to expose myself to all the different points of view because I'm a citizen of this country. I vote here, and I need to know how to make my vote count.
If I may offer another point, here in Slovenia, many on the political right also claim that mainstream media has become a mouthpiece for the left-wing parties, similar to Democrats in the United States. Mm-hmm. Do you see any parallels or key differences compared to the American media scene?
Well, it's very similar, very similar. And I think that the difference is that everybody here pays a TV tax to support public media, which ends up being RTV and their associated channels. And I think you just have to realize it for what it is. Public media in the United States is also very biased on the left. At the moment, the Congress is talking about taking away the money from National Public Radio and public broadcasting television. What I see is the need for more, accept what RTV is. You know what you're going to get there. And they also have to provide programming for children and game shows and, talk shows and other things. So it is what it is. This is a small market of people who speak Slovenian. In contrast to the United States, which is this huge market, which can, through advertising, support many different channels. That's a huge difference. That, we're talking about a small market, large market. And the challenge that I see is for the voices on the right to find more support so that they can compete better with the publicly funded television.
Were you surprised by how anti-American some segments of Slovenian public seems to be, even when it comes to the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, who is Slovenian? It's often hard to hear anything positive being said about her.
I have not found that. I find that they're a little bit disappointed that she hasn't embraced her Slovenianness a little bit more. We didn't really even hear her speaking the Slovene language in public until the Los Angeles fires. And she was meeting a fire victim who I believe came from Croatia. And the woman was speaking in Serbo-Croatian, or just Croatian. And Melania was responding to her in Slovenian. And I'm like, oh my God, Melania is speaking Slovene. This is historic. And I never understood why, with Ohio in the first Trump term being such a huge swing state, it's more on the right now, but it was a swing state at the time. That's where most of the Slovenian Americans are. They're in Cleveland, they're in Ohio. Why didn't they send Melania to Ohio and have her say, Dobar dan? I think it would have really helped, but Trump has gotten some criticism. Oh, you married an immigrant, and questioning whether she and her parents are there legally or illegally. They're legal, but the left likes to make a big issue about it. So I guess they figured it would hurt more than it would help.
During Donald Trump's first term, she was also heavily criticized by American media. Mm-hmm. But do you think the American public ultimately accepted her? It seems that many people were especially impressed by her elegance and style.
Well, the people who like Trump like her, and the people that don't like Trump don't like her at all. But you can't deny that she is a beautiful woman and a fashion model who makes I don't agree with her fashion choices all the time, but she looks great in everything. And then when I walk in the streets of Ljubljana, I see a lot of women with great personal style, and she can work with all the famous designers in the world, but Slovenian women have this sense of style that they pull it all together. And I think that's kind of cool.
Donald Trump had quite a few fans across Europe. But ever since that famous or unfamous Munich Security Conference, where J.D. Vance, vice president, appeared and lectured European leaders about migration and their inability to ensure their own security, many have started to turn away from the new Trump administration. Now that President Trump is back in office, how do you see the relationship evolving between the United States and Europe? Is the tension here to stay, or is there still room for rebuilding trust?
The first thing about Trump is that he is a businessman and a deal maker. So you can't take everything that he says literally. People who like Trump say you can take him figuratively, but not literally. People who hate him take him literally and criticize him.
But we're not used to that kind of diplomacy.
Well, nobody is. I mean, these people in the Trump administration have only been in office, as we sit here right now, have only been in office for less than 3 months. Things are happening so fast. It's like, pass the popcorn, we're watching a movie here. And in the past 4 years, we had a president who was not functioning mentally. We don't know who was really running the country, but it wasn't Joe Biden. And I would much rather have a leader who is out there trying to get a better deal for his country rather than someone who's sleeping on the beach all the time.
But an even bigger turning point came after the now famous or unfamous public clash in the Oval Office with Ukrainian President Zelensky. You've reported from the White House yourself. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen anything quite like that?
I was totally shocked, but I think for different reasons than you were shocked. That particular room with those chairs is where everybody comes when the deal is finished. All they have to do is sign the papers, shake hands, have a nice lunch, and everybody's happy. The journalists get a story, countries make a deal, and it's all good. I would urge your audience to watch the entire 49-minute clip of that meeting. It started out to be exactly that. Everyone was friendly, everyone was complimenting each other, and then Zelensky had a point to make. And then J.D. Vance jumped in. And that's the part where people start watching the clip. And it looks like J.D. Vance just decided to give Zelensky a lecture when that's not what really happened. They both kind of contributed to it. The shocking thing for me, having been one of the journalists in that room for that kind of occasion, was instead of going on to sign the papers and having a nice lunch, they sent him home. Because
they kicked him out of the White House.
Yeah, he didn't follow the diplomatic script. And it was Zelensky that went off the script first. And then J.D. Vance responded to what he said, and then Trump got into it. And I hope, and I really feel that it's possible for this to be saved. We had a big turn over the weekend where all of a sudden now Trump is realizing that it's not going to be easy to bring both Putin and Zelensky, Ukraine and Russia, to the table. He was saying during the campaign he'd get it done in 24 hours, and it's not getting done.
But does Trump's style of diplomacy hurt his public support in the United States in any meaningful way? Networks like CNN seem shocked by almost every move he makes, yet his base remains loyal. Why do you think that is?
Well, Trump could sneeze and CNN could be shocked. It just loses its power at some point. His base is really more concerned about the economy. He's bringing down already the price of gasoline. Eggs were a crazy price because Biden had killed millions of chickens. And so eggs got really expensive. They've brought down the price of eggs. But people are not really feeling it in the economy yet. It's only been 3 months that he's been in power, but people are concerned about that. There's huge public support for how he has shut down the border in a very short period of time to shut down the millions of people who were coming across illegally, and we didn't know if they were being sex trafficked or if they were criminals or what. And Trump has shut that down. And there's great public support for that. But as far as the foreign policy, it's as Trump says, we're separated from it by an ocean. And people see that our bridges are crumbling, our children can't read. The United States is $36 trillion in debt. We don't have any more money to send to Ukraine unless we borrow it from somewhere like China. And there's not a lot of public support for sending more money. There's also not a lot of public support for sending Americans into a war anywhere, not just Ukraine, but anywhere. And I think Trump made that promise that he would not start any wars. He didn't start any in his first term. And he's trying to make the best effort that he can make to bring peace. But he needs the other people to join him.
If we stay at foreign diplomacy, his talk about buying Greenland, threats of high tariffs, it's hard for Europeans to interpret these kinds of statements from President Trump as anything but negative. Is there another way to understand them?
Well, he's Trump. Everything to him is a poker game. It's a negotiating position. You can calm down. Europe, please calm down. United States is not invading Greenland, okay? There's already a military base there. There's really no reason to invade it. They're already there. I think Trump is realizing that in the larger geopolitical scheme of things, there's a lot of action up at the top of the world in the Arctic. And you've got China making a bid and Russia making a bid, and Greenland is very strategic. And Trump wants America to be part of that conversation. And his way of doing it might not be the most diplomatic, but he certainly gets attention. But stop worrying, we're not invading Greenland anytime soon, or Canada.
European and American liberal media often speak with one voice when it comes to Elon Musk, emphasizing how unpopular he is, especially since he took on a central political role in the second Trump administration as head of the newly established Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
Well, first of all, again, if we have a saying in journalism, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. And before I came in here today, I thought I would just look up the latest numbers on Elon Musk and DOGE. And if you look at a poll that was very reliable during the election, the Rasmussen reports, it's about 3/4 of the people are okay with cutting government waste and fraud. I mean, how could you be in favor of government waste and fraud? Nobody wants that. What the leftist media has done really well is portray it as these crazy computer guys going around and firing a bunch of people. One of my Slovenian neighbors asked me, why did Trump fire all the teachers? I said, that never happened. He didn't even fire one teacher. But closing the Department of Education, which doesn't teach any children, it's just a bunch of bureaucrats, somehow got translated in Slovenia to Trump fired all the teachers. And it's just not true. And I think Elon Musk, who brought our astronauts back from the space station, including our Slovenian-American astronaut Suni Williams, the leftist media is giving him no credit for that. He's a brilliant guy, and I think he's not getting the credit he deserves.
Several members of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency made their first public appearance as a team to make the case for their cost-cutting efforts amid growing pushback. Musk and 7 DOGE staffers sat for an interview with Fox News host, was Brett Baier, right? Brett Baier on Thursday, discussing their push to slash $1 trillion of government spending. The revelations were shocking to me. One example is an online survey questioning people if they like national parks. The government was charged almost $1 billion for that. Were you shocked?
Well, I was shocked by that, but I'm even more shocked to come over here to Slovenia and Europe and find out you guys aren't getting the news. It's like you've only heard the side of the story that's told by the people on the left who hate Trump. There is another very important side of the story, that the waste and the fraud was huge. And good on you, Luca, that you actually sat down and listened to the whole interview. Because as a journalism teacher, I teach my students, go to the primary sources. Don't just rely on the journalists to tell you a biased interpretation of what's happening. Go to the interview where Elon Musk is talking and where his 7 guys who are the heads of different departments are talking. These are respected Silicon Valley leaders who are trying to apply their skills to making our government more efficient. And the things they've discovered, they're giving out small business loans to small babies. That's for sure somebody defrauding the government.
I was shocked by a lot of things.
Yeah.
In both commerce and health department, they have like 72 different IT systems, not 2 of which could talk with each other. And most of them were from the 70s and 80s. So they're like half a century old. It's the world's largest service business that's using archaic equipment.
It's crazy how you in that same interview you heard about the mine in Pennsylvania, that the records for retirement of the government workers are underground in this mine on paper. They're not even computerized. That system has been like that since the 1950s and never modernized, even though they've spent a lot of money on it. Where did the money go? We don't know. But they are going to try to make the government more efficient. And that can only be a good thing.
Tom Krause, an American businessman, executive who is chief executive officer of the cloud software group, is also part of DOGE. He said they're applying private company standards to federal government. I find this really interesting. He said that it's alarming how financial operations and financial management are set up today. There is only one bank account that is used to disperse all money that goes out of the federal government. Only one
Isn't that
bank
crazy?
account, and there are like $800 billion on accounts every day. Yeah.
And they don't put a note on the check like what it was for, who got the money. Elon Musk said they're trying to trace where the money went, and there's no record of it. It's just crazy what they're finding. And then when they try to stop it, we have these leftist judges who step in and put everything on hold. I think ultimately they will win and be able to cut the government, but at the moment everything is tied up in court.
But there are over 15 million people over 120 years old marked as alive by social security system, yet Democrats are now accusing Elon Musk of destroying security system from within.
Well, what the left is trying to say is, oh, poor grandma isn't going to get her money because Elon Musk took it away. No, he just wants to take it away from the people who stole grandma's social security number and her money. Yeah. So the people who deserve the money, who have worked and earned their pension and their money, Elon Musk is no threat to them.
Silicon Valley CEOs are bringing like their policy to government and clashing with the exhausted bureaucracy. Will they succeed eventually, in your opinion? They warned that if they don't, America would go bankrupt sooner or later.
Well, Elon Musk believes that to be true.
Is this a real threat?
Elon Musk, who's smarter than I am, believes that to be true. I don't really know what to think, but I do recognize the concern that, you don't really want Silicon Valley to be an unelected government. And you don't want to give these guys too much power. You want them to go in and identify the problems, maybe invent something that they can make a better way to pass out the government money and prevent fraud. But you don't want to be answering to Silicon Valley instead of Washington. So it is important that they keep these guys in their lane. But on the other hand, it's not sustainable for the United States to be $36 trillion in debt. And if we continue to be in that position with failing to solve the problems that we have within the country, the United States, even if it still is a country, is going to be a very badly functioning country.
But can you understand why some people are afraid of Silicon Valley CEOs taking over federal government?
Well, they're not. They're studying it and they're making recommendations. And those recommendations, as we've seen, don't always happen because they can be stopped in the courts, or maybe Trump will decide, well, I don't agree with that idea, or Kennedy or some other minister of the government will not go along with it. They're not being handed any power except to study the problem and maybe come up with some ideas for solving it.
How do you see the warming of relations between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? Is this true about Trump's efforts to end the war in Ukraine, or is there more behind the scene? And do you think he actually has a chance of succeeding?
I'm just a humble retired journalist. So what I found very interesting just over the weekend, yesterday, Trump gave an interview with NBC where he is getting tired of not seeing more progress from the Russians towards ceasefire and eventually peace. And he threatened, I really would like to hear the actual interview. I only saw the NBC report. But according to NBC, which hates Trump, he is threatening to put double tariffs on every country that buys anything, including gas and oil from Russia.
The report said that Trump is losing his nerves with Putin.
No, he's getting tougher with Putin. I mean, just in the past 48 hours, Trump has taken a different tack with Putin. And he says he is still talking with Putin. He believes they will eventually come to a deal. But, we can all see that the Russians are still bombing in Ukraine instead of talking peace. And so I think Trump is not going to be okay with that forever.
Let's talk about another executive order that Trump signed in the Oval Office. It's dismantling DEA, diversity, equity, inclusion programs. I recently read an article in the conservative tabloid New York Post. I think it was suggesting that DEI policies played a critical role in undermining California's preparedness for devastating wildfires.
There were a lot of problems that led to that. But wildfire is sort of a natural occurrence in California, and they need to be prepared for it on a regular basis. I nearly lost my home in California to a different wildfire in 1993. And you need to have people in the jobs in the fire department, in the disaster response teams, in the mayor's office that are the most highly qualified people. And in recent years, California has been saying, well, when we hire the fire chief, it should be a woman. And not only a woman, but she should be gay. And the question of, well, is that person the best qualified?
Selection was no longer based on merit.
Yes, these other factors became very important. And in California, at the moment, it's one-party rule by Democrats. And if they are enforcing this DEI, that's what happened. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, all those houses burned because the fire chief was a gay woman. But the implication by the right is that if you consistently choose people who aren't the most qualified for the job based on merit, you're going to have problems. Same thing going on in the military. Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, has gotten rid of some people who were held up by the Biden administration as examples of people who represented DEI in action. And now they're saying, we want our fighting force to be the best people, and whatever that means, what race they are, what gender they are, we just want them to be the best.
New York Post suggested that after Democrats lost America, they could also lose California, but it doesn't seem so, right?
It will be very difficult because California is a very, very blue state. They're very well organized, and the vote, frankly, is not honest. During COVID, they made it legal to send ballots to every house. Didn't matter if the people were citizens, if they were babies, everybody got a ballot. And there was no oversight of who was filling out these ballots, who was sending them in. And then California, after the election is over, keeps counting the votes until they find enough votes to get the result that benefits the Democrats. So it's very different from here in Slovenia, where you're automatically registered to vote as a citizen. You get the invitation inviting you to your polling place, and then you have to show your ID to vote. That's not what's been happening in California, and so I'm not here with any evidence of cheating, but it is a situation that very easily could support cheating.
Here in Slovenia, we recently saw protests against the militarization of Europe, as it was suggested by the European Commission. People were even singing John Lennon's Imagine song on the streets of Ljubljana. Many simply don't feel threatened by Russia. Now that you're living here in Ljubljana, do you personally feel threatened by this war, by Vladimir Putin, or do you share the sense of peace and distance from the conflict?
Well, when the war first broke out, Putin first invaded Ukraine, many Americans were asking me the same question. Oh, Terry, you're in Ljubljana. Are you close to the fight? No, it's many kilometers away and several countries in between me and...
But only one country in between, Hungary.
Right, Hungary. Yeah, I personally don't feel threatened. On the other hand, I think Europe needs to do more for its own security. There's been a sort of learned helplessness of relying on the United States, really ever since World War II, through NATO. And I know from different journalism tours I've taken of the NATO headquarters, realistically, NATO is largely the United States. And in recent years, certainly Poland and some other countries have stepped up and spent more on defense and more on their military, but Europe doesn't have an army. They need to start having meetings about this and get the military in gear pretty quickly, because Putin's not waiting around. And so on that level, I feel nervous that the European Union is not doing enough.
Slovenia's left-leaning government under Prime Minister Robert Golob has been raising taxes and introducing new ones. Your son probably felt it. Bureaucracy continues to grow, and NGOs receive generous state funding. Some have even received money from the US through USAID. Are you surprised that more people aren't on the streets of Ljubljana protesting against these policies, raising taxes?
Well, that's what governments do, right? They raise taxes. Doesn't matter if they're left or right, they raise taxes. Although Trump likes to brag that he cut taxes. What surprises me about Slovenia is why people aren't protesting in the streets about the healthcare system. It's very difficult to have a doctor if you live in Ljubljana. My son had a doctor, but she quit, and he had a very difficult time to find another doctor. And I think I've heard from other people that sometimes they can't find a doctor in the city.
But our left political parties keep saying our healthcare system is better than the one in the United States.
Well, if you have health insurance, it's expensive to have health insurance, but if you have it, it covers things. And if you're poor, you get a government subsidy, you get government paid health care. And if you're a retired person, you get Medicare, which you do pay for, but it really covers everything. Fortunately, I'm in good health, but when I'm here in Slovenia, my health insurance is not accepted. So I have to go to the pay clinic. And I injured my knee and I needed an MRI, and they said 6-month wait. 6 months, but if you pay for it yourself, we can get you in tomorrow.
What did you do?
I went back to the US and I had the MRI. And I could get it the next day and my insurance paid for it.
Why do you still believe that Slovenia is a beautiful little corner of the world, a place where you can peacefully enjoy your retirement?
Oh, come on, just look around. I love it that I have everything I need to enjoy life within walking distance of where I live in Ljubljana, and everything from a really nice kavarna, a nice bar, nice gostilna. I can even take the bus to Šmarna Gora and do a little mountain climbing, or I can rent a car and go into the Soča Valley and enjoy the beauty there. I'm planning to make more videos from around Slovenia. I don't know where I'm going to go next, so maybe your viewers could recommend something to me for making the next video. I'd like to have another one get 400,000 views like Melania.
It will be tough, but we can try.
Yeah.
What excites you the most about life here today? Is it the cafes of Ljubljana that remind you of Vienna, or are these the forests and countryside that feel a bit like maybe Vermont, or the mountains which may even bring back memories of Sierra Nevada mountains?
Oh, yes.
In California.
Well, I feel a connection here because of the values that I was raised with by my Slovenian, American, Polish family. People love sports. They're into health and fitness. They're into sitting down and having a coffee and not just, well, they certainly do a certain amount of texting, but there's a feeling that there's a better work-life balance here. They take their weekends really seriously. And if I were still in the working world, if I were still working 2 jobs, presenting a television newscast and teaching in the university at the same time and trying to be a mom, this would not be the country for me. But I'm at a point in my life where I can enjoy the life here and take my time doing it. And I wish my father had lived to come back and bring his trumpet and play in the polka band. Unfortunately, he passed away, and he would have loved it here so much.
Terry Anzur, thank you very much for joining us here on Domovina. It was my pleasure to talk with you.
And you too, Luca. Thank you for your great questions.
Thank you.
Hvala za pogovor.
Vam pa, spoštovane gledalke, spoštovani gledalci, hvala za pozornost. Verjamem, da je bil tole zelo zanimiv pogovor in da ste izvedeli marsikaj novega, še kakšno plat zgodbe, ki je morda ne morete izvedeti iz slovenskih in drugih evropskih medijev. Vidimo se prihodnji teden.